Well, hi everybody. I'm your grandson. By the way, subscribe to Lama Arts. The second one that I seen is not the look-see. I've already seen that. That's on Crypt TV. The look-see on which one? Where was it? It was something with like a pizza delivery or something. But now I'm watching Lama Arts, so I can get scared. I might get scared. I might not. Some of these are just worthless. Some of these are just, oh my god. Some of these are just, oh wow. They're just scary. Some of these
This
are.
happened about 5 years ago when I was 21. Me and my friend Seth got into this app which showed you ghosts.
Oh!
We go out ghost hunting, but
did you hear that? Did you hear
nothing
that?
much would happen, which showed you ghosts.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? My name.
Seth got into this app when I was 21. Me and my friend Seth got into this app which showed you
My name.
ghosts. We go out ghost hunting, but nothing much would happen. Sometimes a dot would appear on one of our phones and it would say random words. We would ask, "How did you die?" Stuff like that. And sometimes the answers lined up, but it was mostly random. One night, around 2 a.m., Seth suggested going to the cemetery to see if the app picked anything up. I was hesitant, but I nervously agreed. We started making our way through the neighborhood towards the cemetery. It was weird as the streets are normally lined with cars, but they were empty on this night.
Oh.
We walked down the middle of the road with the app running.
I'd
and it
be
wasn't
gone.
picking anything.
I legitimately be gone. That's 3 a.m. It's close to 3 a.m. Jesus.
We finally made it to the cemetery, which was a small, family-owned one where they only buried their own. Seth went up to the gate and started shouting, hoping to get a response on the app, but nothing happened. I was standing in the road, feeling unsettled, when Seth starts yelling, "Is that all you've got?" I told him to stop disrespecting the dead and we should leave. He tried being funny, saying, "Oh, I'll make them show up," and jumped the gate and started stomping on the graves while screaming, "Come on, show something." All of a sudden, our phones said something at the same time. I looked down at my phone and it was there. We both just stood there, looking at each other when 10 or so red dots appeared on the radar. And it said,
I'd be out of there. I'd leave my friend behind.
it again.
If it was my best friend, I'd leave him behind. I don't care.
I looked back up from my phone. Seth was next to me. I said, "We have got to go." As soon as I said that, we could hear the street lights turning off one by one from the top of the street, getting closer to us. We took off running as fast as we could. We got about halfway into the neighborhood before running out of breath and having to stop. I felt like I was going to throw up from being scared and winded.
Okay, this is not
I
scary.
heard my phone say something. It was muffled, but I knew what it said. Being too scared to look at my phone, I looked at Seth, who looked terrified. He nodded at me to get my phone out, so I slowly pulled it out, and it said my name across the top. I turned my phone off and said, "Screw this, I'm done." We made our way back to my house and had
I'd be done. Like, when I was going to the cemetery, I'd be
a
done.
cigarette to calm down. We were talking about what just happened, almost
So you want cancer, huh? Smoking?
not believing it, when I heard my phone again. This time it was my sister's name. We just stood there, frozen, not saying a word, when it went off again and said my brother's name. I took my phone out, turned it on, and deleted the app. I asked Seth to stay the night, but he refused. I can't blame him. When I finally got to sleep that night, I dreamt a muffled voice repeating a word over and over. I started to wake up and the words became clearer. My phone was off, with the battery out. But when I turned it over, it was lit up with the app running. It had a red dot about 6 feet from me, still repeating. I woke up the next morning and went to the bathroom. I had a razor-thin cut from my left shoulder to my right hip. I don't know what happened that night, and nothing has happened to me since. Needless to say, I don't mess with that kind of stuff anymore.
And I'm not scared, I'm just weirded out. Because why would a ghost do that and not just kill you?
Thank you to XP Pen for sponsoring the...
Now I'm like weirded out. Oh, here's the scary part. Here's the scary part. If you yourself cannot release, it will come to take a piece. They're talking about a monster. Oh, my finger's showing out. That's what that was. Real life version is more scary. So I'll watch Crypt TV after I watch all these. Except for the ones that I've already seen. I want to watch a School Lockdown one because that one was good. Oh, I forgot about that. I thought that was just a weirdo coming in, like, through the wall. Oh, she's dead. Don't do it. Don't do it. I would be gone. I would be gone. Yeah, I've already seen this. I can't react. But I would be gone. I'd leave. I go to the other side. I'm still here. I mean, I shouldn't watch all because that's going to take a long time, but I will watch a lot of them. I got nervous the first time I seen this and realized like its skin is off and it's just automatically death. I'm waiting for the cool part. Here it is. He must have fried another ring. That was good. I'm just trying to scare kids with this stuff. LOL.
Are we gonna fit?
Oh, this one is scary. Just like.
Hey, everybody.
Is it the same kid? Dude, it happened. 301.
This is a short but terrifying story of something that happened when I was Snapchatting a friend. I'm pretty young. I'm only 13, still in middle school. A girl I really liked had just recently started snapping me selfie pictures, and we started messaging each other for a few nights. One night when I was watching TV, she sent me a snap of herself laying in her bed without a caption. I sent a message saying, "What's up?" She sent another identical picture, this time with a caption saying, "Not much, you?" She set the timer to 10 seconds, so it gave me plenty of time to analyze the picture, including her bedroom in the background, and the dark outline of a person standing by her window. I quickly sent a response message saying, "Is that your brother by the window?" She sent another identical snap, this time captioned, "What do you mean?" In this picture, the figure at the window was closer,
and I could see a hand pressed up against the glass. I closed the snap before the timer even ran out so I could tell her quicker. I said, "There's somebody at your window, turn around." She opened my snap almost immediately, and then I didn't hear from her again on the app. I grew more and more worried as the minutes passed. I texted her a few times to no avail. I tried calling her a few times to no avail as well. I didn't know her house phone number, otherwise I would have called her parents. It wasn't until midnight when I was already laying in bed that she finally texted me back. She explained the whole situation. As soon as she looked at her window and saw the person standing there, she screamed. And that caused the person, who turned out to be a 20-something-year-old man, to open the window and jump into the room. From there, she ran to her parents' room and woke her dad, who went to her room to find nothing but an open window. It wasn't exactly a personal story of mine, but it freaks me out nonetheless, knowing that the only thing that saved my friend from whatever could have happened was the fact that I was able to see the window through her selfies, unbeknownst to the creeper at her window.
Thank God. That was a nice guy. Wow, I would have. This is how he makes it. I want to see this. Because I want to start making this stuff. I already had a scary story once. Or actually, a clown. My friend scared me. Oh. I don't have that. Stupid ads. I'm gonna have to blind it next time.
So this happened a few months ago. I'm 26. I was at JFK Airport in New York with 5 friends. All of us were about to fly down to Florida to spend the week in a beach house. We had a few more minutes to kill in the airport before we would board our flight, and I really had to go to the bathroom all of a sudden. I was baffled to see a line out the door for the bathroom. I noticed a janitor walking by, so I asked her if there was another bathroom nearby that wouldn't be so crowded. She laughed and told me she shouldn't really be telling people, but there was another bathroom past the door she was pointing at, down a narrow flight of stairs and to the left. I thanked her because she was extremely nice and followed the direction she gave me. Sure enough, behind that door that no one would think to open was a small stairway that led down to a really poorly lit, skinny hallway.
I would not go down there.
It was so narrow that if 2 people were to pass by each other, one person would have to stand against the wall to make room. I found the bathroom right away. The door was extremely heavy and hard to push. Also, the lights were on inside of the bathroom, and it was filthy in there. It was evident that nobody ever really came in there to clean. Now, this is a little embarrassing to mention, but when I go to the bathroom in public places, I always try to make sure nobody else is around to possibly hear me going. So after checking the stall to see that it was unoccupied, I went back into the hallway for a second to take a look down both directions. To the left, there was somebody standing at the end of the hall, in a dark, unlit section of the hallway. It was a disturbing sight, to say the least. All I could do was awkwardly pull my head back into the bathroom and try to pretend we didn't see each other. I went into the stall and just stood there biting my fingers for a minute, dreading the thought of that door opening. And of course, it did. I saw the man's black shoes under the stall door as he walked to the stall next to mine. He shut the door, and then there was silence. No sound of the man unzipping his fly or sitting down, nothing. I realized I didn't really have to go anymore and went to unlock the stall door. That's when I looked up and saw the man's head peering over the stall, looking at me.
Oh, God.
I nearly had a heart attack as my screams bounced off the walls of the tiny bathroom. I ran back up those damn steps and out that door, and then casually walked back over to my friends. I was breathing heavily, but nobody seemed to notice. I didn't tell anyone, just because it was embarrassing, and I didn't want my friends to make fun of me in any way. I know, I guess that seems stupid now. We went on to have our Florida vacation and all had a good time. Of course, the thought of that creepy man haunted me every night that week.
Oh, that was good. Our animations is good. They're good. Dude, this one includes like Jason. I'm watching it, but it's not.
It was approaching the end of summer, and my friends and I wanted to do some cool, mischievous things before going back to school. So, we had the genius idea one night to sneak into a nearby community pool. It was actually only a couple blocks away. It's right smack in the middle of a residential area. So instead of sitting on a main road or something, it actually just sat around a bunch of houses on a quiet road. During a hot day, the little parking lot would be full and the spot would be bustling. But at 1 a.m, the place was of course dead. There's obviously a big fence surrounding the whole front entrance, as well as a cage that gets closed up when the place closes. So our best way was to get in through the side. We snuck into the backyard of a neighboring house and hopped the fence over to the pool. It was as easy as that. The 4 of us took off our shirts and jumped into the pool, which in retrospect wasn't smart, since any of the neighbors could have heard the splashes and just called the police. But we were dumb high schoolers. It was very, very dark within that horror closing. This pool had no lights, which is why it closed at sunset. James, Courtney, and Alyssa were on the other side of the pool, as I was just kind of doing my own thing at first, swimming around and getting my face wet. I saw Alyssa get out of the pool shortly after and run away. I swam over to see what was going on. She was just going to the water fountain, though. The 3 of us just bopped around in the water for a bit, and eventually we heard Alyssa jump back into the pool from the other side. It was too dark to see much more than her black hair covering her face. But just then, we heard Alyssa playfully call something to us as she was walking back to the pool. The 3 of us in the pool looked at each other. I know they were doing the same thing as me, counting heads. There were 3 of us on this side of the pool, and here came Alyssa walking over to our side. So who was that on the other side? Alyssa got in, but the 3 of us were distracted, looking at the head bopping around the water across the pool. James said across the pool, "Who is that?" Not even 2 seconds later, the head went underwater and disappeared from view. We took this time to whisper to each other, mostly things like, what should we do? What if that's security? And should we run? Suddenly, I felt something grab my leg with force and tried pulling me down into the water. I kicked, splashed, and yelled for help. James came over to pull me out of the pool, while the girls were already running for it, screaming. It wasn't until I got to the stairs of the pool that the grip on my leg was released and I was free. We hopped the same fence we climbed over to get in and ran all the way back to Alyssa's house. I was convinced that whoever that was a security guard. That is, until they literally tried to pull me under the water. I don't know what to think. There are a few possibilities. Maybe it was just another kid messing with us. Maybe it was a security guard who went way too far. Or most likely, it was a dangerous person who had ill intents.
That was not a dangerous person who had ill intents. None of that stuff. That was a possessed spirit.
I'm 22 years old, fresh out of college, and I recently got a job at my old high school as a sort of computer intern in the school basement. The basement of the school is very messy and disorganized, but there is a small 3-person office that's actually very nice down there. It has 3 nice big desks, 2 mini fridges, a flat screen TV mounted on the wall, and oh so satisfying air conditioning, a luxury the students and teachers cannot enjoy in the school. And of course, all of the school servers and other computery stuff. I got the job because 3 of my old computer teachers flat out adored me. I could actually consider them as real friends, not just teacher figures. So they all helped tremendously in landing me this job. It's been great until something that happened a few weeks ago. My 2 coworkers that shared the office with me, Dave and Gary, weren't in the office at the time. They were upstairs working on papers or whatever. I was eating my sandwich during my lunch break when I got a phone call from one of the women in the front office telling me the school was on lockdown and that somebody, possibly armed, had entered the school. There wasn't much that I could do other than turn off the lights because, surprisingly, as nice as this little office was, it didn't have an actual door to it, just a big opening, and the door to the whole basement didn't even have a working lock. For my own safety, I did turn off all the lights in the office and my computer screen. I kept my phone on the desk, texting both Gary and Dave, but they wouldn't respond. I sat down there in the dark, playing games on my phone for like 20 minutes, waiting for the call from up front to tell me to resume working. I had no idea what was happening. I couldn't hear what was going on upstairs from down here, but I was not allowed to make any calls until I was informed that the lockdown was over. Then the noisy basement door opened. As the creaking echoed across the basement and into my office, I sat up from my seat, wondering if I should call out Gary or Dave. I was eager to get some info from them. Someone then came running down the stairs, and their footsteps were approaching my office. I pushed away my chair and crawled under my desk. Somebody entered the office but did not turn on the lights. There was just silence. I can't even describe the fear I was experiencing. I felt like if I made one sudden noise, I'd be a dead man. Suddenly, my phone dinged as I got a text message. I felt my entire world shrivel up and die at that one moment as I clenched my teeth in fear. Footsteps suddenly moved closer to me until I finally dove out from under the desk in capitulation, begging whoever it was not to kill me. And just then, someone grabbed my arm and pulled me up. It was some guy in a red plaid button-up jeans and a reddish-black cap. He told me, "It's okay, I'm just down here hiding with you." "What's going on up there?" I whispered to him. He kind of ignored my question and asked me if there's an exit down here. I told him, "Yeah, around that way." Before he could do anything else, I asked him, "Who are you?" There was a brief moment of silence. Before he started explaining, he was coming in to pick up his son when a teacher told him to hide. After his explanation, I checked my phone and saw the text I received was from Dave. It said, "Dude, this is fucking crazy. Some guy with a gun shot Mr. Buckley. He's wearing a red shirt and hat. Whatever you do, don't come upstairs." I was about to reread that text out loud to the man until I realized. I looked up and felt my stomach sink. The man seemed to catch on to my suspicious stare. Panicking, all I could think to do was echo through the basement, and I could hear the bullet ricochet off something metal in the darkness. But thank God the bullet missed me, and I made it upstairs. Before waiting at all exits, including the basement exit, and caught the man the second he opened the door. More good news. Our teacher survived the gunshot. It was later determined that the man and Mr. Buckley had some beef for whatever reason, but that was never revealed. All we know is that Mr. Buckley couldn't have warranted this kind of... And I know that the sound of that gunshot will forever echo in my mind.
Oh, Jesus. You guys see that? He came back. He came back.
I know that the sound of that gun...
He came back. Look at it.
...will forever echo in my mind.
He came back. The other last one is scarier. Snowstorm.
My name is Ethan, and I'm a photographer. I took a trip last year with my wife to the Colorado mountains for an art project. My wife is also an avid skier, so she talked me into adding skiing into the trip. We had the option to book a room at a ski resort or rent out a private log cabin. The second one seemed more romantic, so I picked that one. Plus, it didn't hurt that it was cheaper. The cabin was nothing luxurious or anything. It was a single-floor, 4-room little thing. A 2-person bedroom, a small living room, a kitchen, and a bathroom. It may have been small, but the actual idea of being secluded in a warm log cabin during a blizzard was amazing. However, the storm was interfering with the cable signal, so we didn't have much to do this one particular evening. It was just starting to get dark out at this point, but there was still a decent amount of light outside, so I thought it would be perfect for getting a few shots and videos in the blizzard for backgrounds and wallpapers. I told my wife I'd be back within 10 minutes and slipped on my boots and coat. The moment I stepped outside and shut the door, I noticed footsteps leading up to the door in the snow that had blown under the wooden awning. I could see the prints doubled as whoever left them there turned and went the opposite direction. I was freaked the fuck out, but I wasn't about to go inside and scare my wife. I decided to give in to my curiosity and followed the prints to the right side of the cabin. Right away, I noticed that they led to the bedroom window. My heart froze in fear when I saw this. I could see my wife sitting on the bed using her iPad. She noticed me and I waved. She laughed. I continued to follow the footprints around the cabin to the other side. They led to the living room window on the other side. Someone was stalking us. But how long ago was the question? I found myself standing there for a good minute asking myself if I should follow the footprints anymore. For whatever reason, I decided I would. They were now leading away from the cabin. I knew I was following the prints to where this person was going, not coming from, simply by the boot marks. I followed the prints away from the opening and into the trees. That was where I saw him. A man wearing a black coat facing a tree, slouched down looking at the ground. He was still as a statue, and I could see the snow piling up on his hood and shoulders. I froze in my tracks, trying not to make a sound. I would have thought to ask him if he needed help otherwise, but this guy was just standing there, not doing anything, like some kind of deranged freak. I started to gradually move backwards without even turning around, making sure this man didn't turn around or notice me. When I got at a visual distance, I turned around and stomped through the snow back to the cabin. When I slammed the door shut, my wife came over to see what was wrong. I saw worry in her eyes. I guess she saw the worry in mine. She knew I saw something, and after a few minutes of harassment, I finally told her what I saw. She immediately started packing her things, telling me we're leaving right away. I told her no, we're not going anywhere. I would not get a refund for leaving early, and I wasn't about to up and leave just because some weird guy was walking around outside. She made a point of locking both locks on the door and making sure all of the windows were sealed shut. For the rest of the night, we read stuff on our iPads. I reviewed the pictures and videos I had taken so far. We turned out the lights early as there wasn't much else to do. What if he's still out there? I remember my wife asking me. There's no way he's still out there, I then assured her. Listening to the wind blowing outside, along with the small flakes of snow hitting the windows, was strangely relaxing, and I knew I'd be able to fall asleep quickly. Except if it wasn't for the knock at the bedroom window. We were both still awake, and we both knew it was a knock from a person. I ushered my wife out of bed and out into the living room without turning on any lights. There was nothing to use as a weapon whatsoever. Our only option was to run before something might happen. I told my wife we'd have to forget our luggage and make a dash for the Jeep. We slipped on our boots and coats in the dark in a matter of seconds, and when we heard a knock at the living room window from the opposite side of our car, we took that opportunity to run. I pressed the unlock button, so grateful I chose to have remote locks on my Wrangler, and we hopped in. The car started with ease, and as soon as the headlights flashed on, the man was standing facing the log cabin on our side now. Not a window, just facing the wall of the cabin in the same position I had seen him in earlier, as if he were hiding his face. We drove to the nearby ski resort without much trouble on the Jeep. We stayed there for the night and went back the next day to the log cabin to collect our things we left behind. He wasn't there.
I checked under the bed. That is actually, I think, true. I think it's true, at least.
I'm 27 years old. I live alone in a rural town in Virginia, about 2 blocks away from my parents. My parents are both in their 60s, and my mom has become a very worrisome woman in her old age. Sometimes she walks over uninvited and lets herself in, since I had regrettably given her a key, which can get a bit annoying. Like if I would be out really late on weekends at a bar or with women, I would sometimes come home to my mom sitting in the living room waiting, worried sick. I know you may just think, oh my God, that's crazy. Why not just put your foot down and tell her to stop? Well, because you don't know my mom. It's very hard to describe her, but she's the kind of worrisome, innocent little lady that you just can't bring yourself to go against. And I hate to mention, she also has mild dementia. Anyway, this was Saturday night. I think it was around 2 in the morning. I was at a nearby club with a group of college friends, really the only place to hang out in this boring town, and I was getting ready to head home. I said goodbye to all my friends and walked the 3 blocks it took to get back to my house. I walked up my front stoop in my drunken haze and dug my hand in my pocket for my keys. When I grabbed the doorknob, I realized it was unlocked. My mom was here again. I quietly opened and shut the front door, locking it behind me. I put my keys on the kitchen counter and found a note written in my mom's handwriting saying, "You forgot this at our house, next to the box of half-eaten cake my parents didn't want." I didn't see my mom anywhere, so I assumed she must have gone upstairs to sleep in the guest bed until I got back, which is something she would commonly do as well. Then I heard footsteps upstairs, confirming it, and that's when I sighed once again. 27 years old, almost 3 in the morning, and she still has to wait up and treat me like a child. I ran upstairs to check the guest bed, empty, along with all the bathrooms. I was afraid Mom was having one of her episodes due to her condition, so I ran to the phone to call my dad. After 4 rings, my dad picked up in a grumpy voice, asking what the hell is the matter. After I told him that I heard Mom wandering around upstairs in my house, there was a short pause, and then he said, "That's not possible. She's sleeping right next to me." My mouth fell open as I turned my head to face the dark upstairs, and just barely by the light provided by the kitchen, I could see a head peering around from the corner at the top of the stairs, looking down at me. I screamed into the phone as I ran out the front door and down the street to my parents' house, explaining to my father on the way. About halfway there, my dad told me, "All right, I'm going to call the cops," and hung up. I made it to my parents' house, where my mom was already waiting at the door, worried sick. My mom explained that she did come over to clean my kitchen a little bit and to bring over the cake they didn't want. 2 police cars pulled up in front of my parents' house, where they escorted me and my dad down the street to my house. 1 officer stayed outside with us, while 2 others went inside to investigate. It felt like 15 minutes before they came back outside and said it was clear. They checked the crawl space, the attic, everything. There was really nothing for me to report, other than the door was left unlocked and I saw the outline of a head upstairs before I ran for it. Still, I didn't feel safe sleeping in there that night, so I went back to my parents' house.
Yeah, I
Me
do
and
the
my dad are
same.
certain that my mom simply forgot to lock the door.
I do the same. I just go to my parents' house, rest. I'm gonna live near my parents probably, or like go to my neighbor's house and say, "Can I like sleep with you?" I was like, dude, I feel like so uncomfortable that I'm gonna die unless I had someone to help me like figure out. Like I let them go see the door first. So I'm probably gonna be older.
She left, as her memory has been getting worse over the past few months. My dad has been stopping her from coming over alone from now on, which makes me both sad but also relieved. Some nights I still get paranoid that whoever was in my house that night never left and is still hiding in here somewhere.
Oh, hey, buddy.
It was a typical boring day in calculus, only it was Friday, 7th period, meaning
Yes,
the week was
sure
almost
is.
over and
Laughed
spring
out.
break would finally be
Number
upon
1.
us. So everybody was getting antsy in their seats, I could tell. We didn't have a test that day like a lot of my friends did with their other teachers. So our teacher in the middle of class just decided to start playing games with us on Sporkle.com. He was a very laid-back teacher like that. As we were doing some brand logo quiz on Sporkle, I remember the exact moment it happened. Right after my friend answered a question, I remember the exact answer too, Adidas. The dean's voice came through the loudspeaker. He sounded panicked and frantic as he told all the teachers this was not a drill and to go into lockdown. I actually got the chills, and I got goosebumps on my arms as our usually laid-back teacher, too, seemed panicked as he ran to turn off the lights and ushered us to the back corner of the room. We all sat in silence for about 2 minutes, and then the usual buzzing that came from a panel in the back of the room ceased, indicating that the school must have cut all the power. We all looked at each other, realizing this must be serious. A few more minutes of waiting later, we heard a man screaming at the top of his lungs coming down the hallway. 2 girls in the class actually started crying, which made all of us even more scared. As the screaming got closer to the classroom, the lunatic-sounding man started banging on the lockers while screaming, "I'll kill all of you." It was at that moment that I started to fear for my life. My teacher shushed us as we all looked at each other to see our peers' reactions. The banging then moved from the lockers to our classroom door. And that's when one of the crying girls screamed no. The banging on the door only grew worse as the man started screaming, "Open up." 2 of the girls in the class were crying out loud now. It felt like an eternity that man was pounding at the door. But eventually, he finally continued down the hallway, screaming like a mentally insane person until we could not hear him anymore. I'd say 10 minutes later, though it felt like half an hour given the situation, the dean came back on the loudspeaker explaining the situation, which was surprising for him to do. He explained that some apparently mentally unstable person entered the building and assaulted the woman sitting at the front desk, causing her to flee the building screaming, and staff wasn't sure if the man was armed or not. Now, this was before the school had cameras or could afford proper security, so the school was wide open to something like this happening. The staff had done a sweep of all the hallways and classrooms and couldn't find him, so the dean instructed the teachers to resume teaching, but to keep all the doors locked, to not let any students leave for any reasons. The most disturbing part, however, is that one of the janitors working the night shift found the man sleeping in one of the storage closets near the back end of the school, and according to rumors that were spread by my peers, sticking out of his pocket was a .44 Magnum. The janitor must have done something stupid to wake him up, for example, leaving the closet door open, because by the time a police officer could arrive on the scene, the man was gone. My entire class, as far as I know, to this day, has no idea if this man was ever found, but I like to think that right now, he is being given the proper help that he needs.
I hope so. That one was the scariest one. Second, hitchhiking. Oh no, I hate hitchhiking. Dude, that's why I never hitchhike.
3 months after I turned 16 in 2005, I got my first car, a '99 Toyota Camry. On a warm Saturday night, when my friend Alex invited me over to one of his friend's big parties, I knew I wouldn't be in a condition to drive the Camry home afterward. So we carpooled with Alex's girlfriend, Brianna. We lived in the countryside of Virginia, meaning less big parties. Meaning when there was a big party, it was a huge deal and everyone would go. We lived about 5 to 10 minutes away from this kid's house. I knew where he lived as I was acquainted with him, but not exactly friends. The whole ride there, we took the same 2-lane highway type road through the woods, and this kid's house was actually on this road further down. At certain points on this road, there were a few houses on either side, and then it would just go back to being a long, empty highway again. The house was tiny, like a lot of houses around the area, but the party was held outside anyways, since its closest neighbors were relatively far away, and noise wasn't an issue. I'll skip most of the party up until the point that Brianna, who was supposed to be our designated driver, had to suddenly leave for a small family emergency. Alex said it was fine and that we'd find a ride home. Well, fast forward another few hours and another few drinks, and I could barely even walk straight. I checked my watch, and it was like 2 in the morning. I figured it was time to go. I started looking for Alex, but I couldn't find him anywhere. In fact, it seemed like everybody I knew had already left. I could barely even think straight, but I was still furious at the fact that Alex could have actually left without me. I asked to use the party host's phone and dialed Alex's home number. After 2 tries, I gave up and then realized I shouldn't wake his family up.
So, literally not knowing what else to do, I dizzily stepped out onto the road and began walking back home. I knew this walk would take anywhere from half an hour to an hour in my condition. Maybe after 15 minutes of walking down the road, the slight shine of car headlights on the road was fading in from behind me. Jumping for joy inside, I lifted up my arm and stuck out my thumb. As the car neared, it slowed down and came to a stop right next to me. The man in the '98 Ford Explorer rolled down the window and asked where you headed. I told him my house was just down the road and beyond a right turn, probably slurring my words beyond comprehension. He chuckled and told me to hop in. I thanked him and joyously hopped into the truck. I was exhausted, and I remember completely disregarding things the guy was asking me because I was so close to just passing out. And that's what happened. The memories of being in that truck turned to a fog, as I'm sure I passed out. The next thing I remember, I woke up still in the moving truck. The guy looked at me and laughed, but didn't say anything. I looked around and realized the road we were on wasn't familiar. I nervously asked, where are we going? He then said, so what were you doing out this late anyway? As the man answered my very straightforward question with another irrelevant question, the sobering reality of the situation hit me. You can let me out anywhere, I told the man. The man responded with a firm no. I felt like throwing up as he said that. No, I really actually felt like I was going to throw up. I started to gag as I felt more and more nauseous by the second. The man took his eyes off the road to look at me, and that's when I thought of the perfect distraction. I turned in his direction as I continued to gag, and he started to kind of lean away and slow down the car. Thankfully, I drank as much as I did because I finally threw up and made a point of doing it all over the man's lap. The man yelled in frustration and stopped the car, and that's when I took it upon myself to run for my life into the woods and duck behind a few bushes. The man came following into the woods with a flashlight, and on 2 separate occasions, he shined the light straight over me without noticing. Eventually, I heard his footsteps walk even further in the woods past me. That was when I ran back to his truck, but unfortunately, he was smart enough to lock it. By some miracle, I saw another car approaching in the distance, and I ran out into the middle of the street, waving my arms like a lunatic. The car tried to avoid me, but I wouldn't let it. They were forced to stop, and I yelled at them to help me before they came back. Once I told them that I was kidnapped by the man who was driving that Ford Explorer, the driver agreed to give me a lift. Not to the police station or anything, but to my house. I made it back safely, where I couldn't thank the driver enough. I immediately woke up my parents and told them. My dad wanted to know if I got his tag number. And then I felt like punching myself in the face. I failed to get the simplest information from the guy that would have allowed me to actually properly report him. All I knew was that he drove a faded blue '99 Ford Explorer. I made sure to give Alex a piece of my mind, and part of me always held a grudge against him ever since, just for abandoning me at a party without telling me. I haven't seen him in 4 years now, however, and this was actually the first time I even thought about this incident for almost a year now. As time goes on, even the worst of memories may start to fade. But after writing this to share with the internet, it's once again fresh in my mind.
Okay, what's this? Dude, these are the worst ones. Oh god, no. These should be like
A couple weeks ago, my dad came home and pitched me a small job offer. One of his coworkers was going away for a few days and needed somebody he could trust to watch over his house. The reason my dad pitched this to me was because the man's house has a big CCTV system, basically a camera in every room, and then an operating desk where all screens could be watched on a big monitor. And I'm a computer science major, so my dad just always assumes that I know how to work anything technological. The man told my dad that he'd pay me $200 for the 2 days just to watch the house, whatever that meant. My dad drove me to the house and introduced me to the man, whose name doesn't matter. The man made it seem like he preferred I stay in the upstairs room with the monitors as opposed to roaming the house all day. That was fine with me, though. So when I wasn't eating, I was mostly just sitting in that room with the TV on in the background and doing schoolwork on my laptop. Ironically, the thing I was doing the least was keeping an eye on the monitors. Night came. I started wondering where in the house I should sleep, since surprisingly we hadn't discussed that. So I sat back down at the desk and looked at all the different rooms on the screens to see which rooms had beds or couches. I noticed something I wasn't expecting to notice, though. The back screen door was open downstairs. I didn't remember it being open. I looked through each and every camera screen in a panic. In the living room, a closet door was open. This one I knew wasn't open earlier. I texted my dad to call the man and ask him if he came back home. Meanwhile, I continued watching the screen. On the grainy, dark image, a tall person who resembled only a black shadow on the screen stepped out from the closet. I pulled my arms off the desk as I covered my mouth with my hands in shock. As I did this, however, my left elbow pulled some heavy object from the desk onto the floor, creating a big thud. The person in the image very clearly moved their head up to the ceiling as a response to the noise. They went for the stairs, walking up very, very slowly, step by step. Meanwhile, I got a text back from my dad saying, "No, he's not. I just spoke to him half an hour ago. Why?" I got so caught up in my phone texting my dad to send help that I didn't even pay attention to the monitor. There was a knock at the door. I looked at it and then the screens. The first screen I laid my eyes on was the one showing the person outside the door to the room I was in. When I remembered that door had no lock, the only thing I could think to do was jump out the window into the bushes below. I ran halfway down the block and then stopped when my dad called me. I had him call his friend and ask him if he was expecting somebody in the house. The man said he had no relatives or friends who had his key or would ever let themselves into his home. So he called the cops and had them review the footage. I got to watch all of it, and it showed everything. From the moment the intruder broke the glass of the backyard door to the moment I jumped out the window and him running away shortly after. The intruder was never found. The footage was just too dark to identify his face.
Them are scary. And it's at night. I'd say no. I'd say hands down no. This is probably not going to be
In the year 2009, I was spending a weekend with my uncle on his ranch when my parents were renovating the new house we had just bought. It was my second night there, a Saturday, and it happened to be during one of the biggest thunderstorms of the year. I'd say there were at least 3 crashes of thunder and lightning per minute. And we were in the heart of the storm because the thunder would crash not even a second after the lightning would. I always enjoyed listening to storms while laying in bed. So I stayed up a little later watching TV, just enjoying the ambiance. After the movie I was watching finally ended, I turned off the TV and tried to fall asleep. As I heard the lightning strike from outside, I could have sworn I heard some kind of metallic thud coming from outside at the same time. I didn't pay it too much mind. 20 seconds later, I could have sworn I heard it again. A very distinct metallic thud coming from outside to match the timing of the lightning. I really don't mean to make this sound like a cliche horror story, but my uncle really is a kind of creepy guy, and I was never close with him, even remotely. So for that reason, I didn't feel right going to wake him up. I just tried to forget about it. Now I was getting concerned. What the hell could that be? After the 3rd time, I finally got out of bed and walked over to the window of the guest bedroom. The water pouring down on the window made it extra hard to see what was out there in the dark fields. A flash of lightning momentarily lit up the property, but I couldn't see anything. However, once again, the sound of a metal hit accompanied it.
The sound was so close now. It sounded like it was coming from the left of the window at a blind spot. I was going to do something I knew my uncle wouldn't be happy about. It would be a bit messy, but I was going to open the window and peer outside to see if I could see what the sound was. I unhooked the window lock and slid it up, and immediately the wind of the storm blew drops of rain into the room and onto me. I stuck my head out the window and looked to the left, and at that very moment, lightning lit up the property once again, and I could see a person dressed in all black crouched down by the outside basement door with his hand raised in the air. And before the sky was black, crouched down by the outside basement door with his hand raised in the air. And before the sky was black, crouched down by the outside basement door with his hand raised in the air.
Dude, he has a knife. He has a weapon.
I caught the briefest glimpse of what the sound was coming from. The person was bashing at the basement door lock. I pulled my head in and quietly shut the window, making sure to lock it. I was in a panic. I feared he might have seen or heard me. I ran back to bed and pretended to be asleep, facing away from the window. Lightning crashed once again, but this time there was no metallic thud. My heart must have dropped as I realized this. I just stayed put in bed for the longest time, hoping whoever was out there would go away. After maybe 3 more lightning crashes without any thuds accompanying them, I thought it would be safe to go tell my uncle. I turned to face the window and screamed. There was a figure, clear as day, standing at the window, looking in at me. I screamed as loud as I could and ran straight to my uncle's room. He went outside with his hunting rifle, with nothing on but his pajamas, not even socks. He ran around the entire property yelling like a madman, but didn't find anyone. The next morning, we were able to better see the marks on the basement door lock. It was almost bashed open. Maybe 3 or 4 more good hits would have done it, according to my uncle. He was proud of me for picking up on it. Luckily, I was out of there that same day. My uncle hasn't told us of any incidents since, so I think he's been okay. Not that we talked to him much at all. I'm grateful I stayed up a little later that night watching that movie, because I may have just stopped a robbery, or possibly much worse.
A killing? Yeah, that's a scary one. See what I haven't seen? Oh, I've seen this one. You guys haven't?
This happened a week ago. Up until a few days ago, I went to a small local gym in my now previous New Jersey town called Black Bear Fitness. One day, I had the misfortune of running into some skinny, awkward, yet creepy-looking kid, probably 18 years old. He didn't look like he belonged in a gym at all. I had headphones in and I was doing my set when I heard him saying something to me, but it was muffled by the music. I was already annoyed with this kid. He was breaking an unwritten rule of the gym. Don't try to talk to somebody when they're doing their sets.
Oh my god.
I took my time finishing my set and then took my headphones out to ask if he needed something. Then he started acting like I looked familiar, but right away I knew this kid was just trying some pathetic attempt at making friends. I assured him I didn't, but the kid wouldn't stop talking to me. I'll skip most of the conversation, but eventually he actually asked me for my Instagram and Snapchat, weirdly enough, and for whatever reason I gave them to him. Instead of just saying something like, buddy, I'm trying to work out, or I don't have social media. After I gave him my Snapchat and Instagram, however, I did kind of urge him to let me resume my workout. He finally seemed to get the message and walked away. Not without saying bye like 3 times, though.
Bye.
That night, I got a snap on my phone saying, from Sean. I immediately sighed and said, oh no. Just wondering why the hell the kid would snap me. I opened the snap, and the kid was in a creepy, weird pose, face way too close to the camera, with his head resting in his hand and a half smile on his face. The text over the picture was hey with 2 Y's. I muttered the words, what the fuck? For the record, I'm a guy, which made this even more weird. My thought process was, I've had enough of this loser already. I'm going to remove him and make it clear I don't want to talk if I see him at the gym again. And so I did. I removed him minutes after he sent that snap. I'm sure not even a minute later, again, a message popped up on my phone saying Snapchat from Sean. I waited a few minutes before opening it. This one was even creepier. Now the kid was sitting up on his bed. No smile, more of a surprised, angry expression. The text over the image said, "Why did you remove me?" Now I went as far as to block him, meaning he couldn't snap me anymore. And that was that. I threw my phone on the desk and sighed out of relief. Half an hour later, my phone goes off, saying Sean added you as a friend, and then Snapchat from Sean. He actually made a new account. I opened the snap and felt my heart drop. It was a picture of my front lawn. The text over it, "Answer me, bitch."
Eh.
The first thing I could think of
I'm
was,
just watching
how
like
did
you
he find my
guys.
address? Then I realized, Snapchat made that new map feature that lets you see where your friends are. Somehow I had the balls to open the window to see outside. It was clear out there. I shut the window and the blinds and started considering calling 911. It was the sound of taps on the window. I took a deep breath, and with one swift motion, I pulled up the blind and the window at the same time and pulled the kid into my room by his neck. I punched him in the face a few times before he was out cold. Now I called 911. By the time they arrived, he was awake, cursing me out, promising he'd be back and kill me. The cops heard it all. I didn't even have to make a case. The kid was an idiot. Luckily, the timing of this worked out well because I just moved a couple days ago out of state. Only thing that worries me, I don't want to have to make a new Snapchat account, but somebody new adds me on the app, I'll never know if it's secretly that Sean kid again.
What's up there? Oh no! Yeah, I've seen that one. That one's quite scary.
I was vacationing in the Bahamas when I was 14 with some family friends. My friend and I were getting some henna tattoos at the hotel, and there was this guy lingering around us. But we didn't think much of it because a lot of people would stop to see what was going on. After mine was done, I told my friend and her mom I was going to go back to the room to get ready for dinner. There were two ways to the other side of the hotel, either inside through a bunch of small stores or outside along the pool. I walked through the inside and got to the elevator, where I saw the guy who had been watching us already at the elevator. We got on together, and he gestured for me to choose my floor button first. I clicked it, but he didn't choose another floor. Alarms start going off in my head. But what could I do? I was stuck in an elevator. The elevator stopped on my floor, and I started walking to my room. In this hotel, most of the rooms faced the ocean, so to the right in this hallway were just windows. I was in the very last room on that floor, and I could see the guy following me about 10 feet behind. About 2 doors from my room, he ran up and grabbed me. I kicked and screamed, and he dropped onto the floor. I ran to the room and locked myself in. After talking with security and giving a description, they found the guy and found out that he had actually been following multiple younger women in the building.
That's weird. Oh, come on.
Back in high school, I took a mysteries and mythology type class, or something
Oh,
like that.
I've already
I don't
seen
remember
this,
the
so
name
I'm
of the
now
class.
watching it again.
It basically just had to do with real life mysteries and creepy shit.
I'll show you
I was
the
into that
scary
kind
part.
of stuff. I was taking the class with a good friend. As we continued following the group, we paid extra attention to the tall building we entered from the distance. Formation.
No,
Wasn't a
that
single
one was.
car or heavily by this.
That one was wrong. What's this one called? A Christmas Eve Horror Story. 'Cause that one was just like talking about spirits in 1912. They built that, then they moved after 4 years.
Last year on Christmas Eve, I was working late. I'm 23. I work in New York City and commute home every day on the train. Since I'm one of the younger ones in the office, I got stuck with one of the worst shifts, so I wasn't able to get home until 5 o'clock.
Aww.
My family had already left a whole hour earlier to go to my cousin's house, so I had to drive alone. After having a quick snack before the half-hour drive, I got back in my car and put my cousin's address into my phone. Halfway through the drive, it started snowing. I got to my cousin's house around 6 o'clock. It was snowing heavily by this point, and I just made it in time to catch everyone starting dinner. I brought all of my gifts inside and cheerfully said hey to everyone. I stayed until 11 o'clock. The rest of my family left a little sooner. I stayed an extra half hour or so just to hang out before leaving myself. By the time I was leaving, the ground had accumulated at least 2 feet of snow, and it wasn't even done snowing. The drive home was nightmarish. The roads were hardly even plowed, and I had to drive under 20 miles per hour on most roads. The roads were completely dead at this point, though, most likely because everyone was smart enough to go home before the snow accumulated. Eventually, I turned onto a main road that I'm sure would usually be bustling, but at 11:15 on Christmas Eve night, there wasn't a single car or a single light from the store. It was a ghost town. But then I did notice the flashing taillights of one car. It was parked on the side of the road, and the smoke seeping out from its exhaust with the taillights giving it a red tint. As I got closer, I realized there was somebody next to the car waving their hand in the air. I assumed something was wrong and they needed help. So, me being the good Samaritan I am, I pulled up behind the car. When I opened my door, the guy approached me immediately, barely even giving me time to step out. He was an average-sized man, probably 5'10", 180 pounds. He spoke in a very demanding voice, asking me if I know anything about fixing an engine. I told him I didn't know much about cars. The guy responded very quickly to everything I said. He told me it's fine. He went inside of his car for a second, popped open his trunk, came back out, and told me to just wait by the trunk for a second. I had no idea what he wanted me to do. I was really confused. He walked over to the front of his car, and I heard him open the hood. I couldn't see anything he was doing since the trunk was blocking my view, and the loud wind of the snowstorm overpowered any small noises he might have been making. I put my hands on the back of the car and leaned my body in anticipation, when suddenly I heard 3 or 4 quick and aggressive footsteps in the snow behind me before I was pushed into the trunk. The man tried to close the trunk on me, but I kicked my feet up in resistance and held it up. I was able to overpower him and kick the trunk open completely. As I took advantage of the few seconds I had to get out of the trunk, I took out my keys. He tried to grab me now, and I dug my house key right into his neck. He fell to his knees, and his scream echoed down the deserted street. I was in my car and halfway down the road before he could even get up from his knees. A little further down, I called 911 and reported the guy. I came back in 10 minutes to find blue and red lights illuminating the windows of the deserted stores. The police held him until the ambulance arrived for him. I watched the whole thing, and nothing ever felt better in my life. I got home safely half an hour later and told my family everything. I was still very shaken that Christmas, and this remains possibly the most horrific thing I've ever experienced.
Oh, this is Easter eggs. I shouldn't have called them. These are good. Oh, he was watching Ed and Eddie.
The windows of the deserted stores. The police held it.
This one was okay.
I was in the very last room on that floor, and I could see the guy following me about 10 feet behind. About 2 doors from my room, he ran up and grabbed me. I kicked and screamed, and he dropped onto the floor. I ran to the room and locked myself in. After talking with security and giving a description, they found the guy and found out that he had actually been following multiple younger women in the building.
Oh, yes. No!
Weird sounds coming from inside the walls.
Oh, no.
I first heard it in the kitchen and then in the bathroom. But on night 3, I started hearing it in my bed down.
That one you do not want to watch. It's just really disturbing. It's just really gross and
I
horrifying.
recently moved out, and I already have a horror story to tell. The house I moved into isn't anything impressive. It's just a house that's appropriate for 1 or 2 people. But I'd say right away, I started hearing weird sounds coming from inside the walls. I first heard it in the kitchen, and then in the bathroom. But on night 3, I started hearing it in my bedroom. I was sure there was some kind of animal living in my walls. I just had to figure out how to get rid of it. The next morning, I didn't even have enough milk to fill a bowl of cereal. I couldn't believe I hadn't realized I needed more milk. In fact, I seemed to be eating up all of my food pretty fast. I woke up in the middle of that night to the sound of breathing. Not my breathing. It sounded just like the breathing of a person. I flipped the lamp on and it stopped. I chalked it up as my mind playing tricks on me after waking up. The next day was really hot, so I turned on the AC for the first time. I checked every single vent, and some of them weren't blowing any air. One of them being the vent right next to my bed. I peered through the vent with a flashlight. There wasn't even a duct behind the vent. It was just the inside of the wall. It seemed that whatever air duct was in there had been removed. Unfortunately, I didn't look into the air conditioning system while buying the house, so I didn't know about this. That night, I had to sleep in the heat with no AC, so I was up pretty late, constantly rolling around and flipping the pillow over. Then I eventually started to hear the breathing again, but this time I was fully awake. I knew it was real this time. It was coming to my left. I looked to my left at the air vents. The sound was surely coming from in there. I grabbed the flashlight again and shined it in through the vent. I dropped it and screamed. There was someone's face peering through the cracks of the vents. The first thing I saw were their eyes, open wide and glowing. I screamed all the way down and out the house. I soon found out there was a crazy, dangerous homeless man living in my walls, and he had been eating my food ever since I moved in.
Wow.
I was doing some night hog hunting in the woods near my backyard.
I was hiding in the tower I had built about a decade ago. In case anyone's wondering, I of course had a night vision scope attachment. I guess I'm what you would consider a hardcore hunter. I don't want to bore you with the unnecessary story prolonging details, so I'll make this short. And I want everyone to know that though I agree this story sounds far-fetched and crazy, it is nothing but the truth. And I, in a way, actually consider myself lucky that I'll always have such a horrifying story to share. So, while I was sitting in the tower waiting for movement, it finally came. I took aim and found the source. But it wasn't at all a hog or anything.
By the way, I just want to say I'm sorry if it's disturbing. I didn't know. I didn't watch all these. I only watched Master Self watch these.
The kind of animal I was expecting. It was a person. A man wearing all black. Black sweatpants, black shoes, and a black hoodie with the hood over his head. But that wasn't the freakiest part. He was dragging a sack behind him. My heart started racing. I was pretty sure I was witnessing this guy trying to bury a body. I continued to watch him, but then he slowed down, and I swear to God, it looked as if he turned his head up to me. I ducked down under the wooden walls of the tower, shaking in my boots. Yes, I had a gun, but just the idea of using it against a person is horrifying. I lay low, praying to God that he hadn't seen me. It wouldn't make sense if he could, though. It's practically pitch black out here. Or at least, that was my logic. Seconds felt like an eternity as I waited for the footsteps in the leaves to move elsewhere, but I didn't hear any footsteps. All I heard was the sound of a foot hitting one of the wooden planks on the ladder of the tower. I felt the entire tower vibrate and shake as there were 2 more steps moving up the ladder. At this point, I was asking myself deep down, am I going to be able to shoot someone? But for some reason, whoever was down there decided not to climb all the way up, as I heard them jump back down to the forest ground and began dragging the sack away. I think I stayed frozen like a statue for at least 10 minutes before even peeking over the ledge again. The coast seemed clear. I had to get home and warn the police immediately. I hopped over the ledge and descended down the ladder. I turned on my pocket flashlight, which in hindsight was a stupid move considering the situation, and ran back in the direction of my house. I was only able to run for about 10 seconds or so when we heard the rapid, manic footsteps crunching the leaves from behind me. I took a look over my shoulder, and there he was, inches away from my face. I spun around and shot him in the shoulder. He stopped and screamed in agony, and I took that moment to finish my dash to my house. Again, in hindsight, I should have held him hostage somehow, but that doesn't even matter now. I called the police, who showed up within 15 minutes with a whole search squad, and I led them all into the woods to the exact location where I shot him. There was a faint yet noticeable blood trail spilled onto the leaves, which led past the body bag, which the cops seized, and eventually right to the maniac, who was hiding under a log next to a tree. He was arrested and tried for the murder of Jin Quen Sakanaki, a Japanese corner store owner. I don't know the full story behind it, but I do know I won't forget this one for the rest of my life, and I'll also be telling it for the rest of my life. I'll never forget the time me and my brother snuck out past our bedtimes to explore an allegedly haunted house down the block. Yes, I said bedtime, as I was only 10 and my brother Luke was only 12. When our parents said goodnight to us, I went to Luke's room and we took a couple hand-powered flashlights with us and hopped outside through the window. Luckily, his room was on the first floor. Those hand-powered flashlights worked by constantly pushing in a little trigger that would create light inside the lens. They were noisy as hell, but they were convenient. Once we were outside, we just walked down the block, and in 2 minutes we were there. It was rumored by all the neighborhood kids and teens that the place was haunted. Everything about it was creepy. The older, more antique design of the house, the isolation from the rest of the houses, and the broken windows and rotting wood. It seemed perfect for a horror movie. We went around to the backyard. This was all my curious and confident brother's idea. I was scared shitless. The door was locked, as expected. felt a bit of relief, thinking we might just go home. But my brother made a shocking move next. He grabbed a plank of wood laying in the grass and began smashing the already chipped window. Eventually, there was enough of an opening to unlock it and slide it up completely. We hopped inside and began cranking those noisy-ass flashlights. Immediately after entering the house, we both picked up on the fact that it was like 90 degrees in there, which was odd as it was a September night in the mid-70s. There was no graffiti or anything anywhere. In fact, it was relatively empty besides a few pieces of furniture that were clearly not worth taking along. It seemed we were the first to enter the house, shockingly, or at least from the back. We went upstairs to the main floor from the little den area and continued cranking the flashlights. That's when we heard the slightest crack in the floorboards from right above us. We both jumped. I tugged for Luke to leave, but he told me the place is old as hell. It's just house noises. I stopped cranking the flashlight at this point, and I urged Luke to do the same, but he only called me stupid for suggesting something so ridiculous. Then there was another crack in the floorboards from above us. He began walking upstairs. I didn't want to go up there, but I was not about to stay down there alone. I followed behind him to the upstairs. There was a door that led to a room right above where we were standing. I begged him not to open it, but he must have just wanted to be the big, tough older brother. He began to reach for the doorknob while still cranking the noisy flashlight, but then he stopped. I was confused. I could see in the dark he was moving his ear up against the door, listening for something. Silence. Then, the most deafening, nightmare-inducing moment of my life. A single bang on the door from the other side sent my brother staggering into the wall in pain, covering his ear. We dropped the flashlights and ran straight out the back door and back home. We were so loud when we got back that our parents found us out. We told them what happened, but they naturally didn't care and grounded us both for a week. 2 nights later, I woke to the sound of something from outside my window and a glare of brightness sneaking in through my slightly opened blind. I sat up, and my heart sank when I realized it was the sound of the crank to my flashlight. I stood up and looked out the window. That's when it stopped. There was nothing but complete blackness out there after that. I woke the next day barely remembering what happened, and I still hope today that that part was just a dream.
Growing up, by yourself, you can either go nuts or you can have a very greedy attitude for it. When you're in school and you don't have any friends or this and that, that's a way of circumventing.
This story took place a long time ago. Back in 2002, when Craigslist was in its early years. Many wouldn't know, but back in those days, Craigslist was a lot different. There was a lot more so an online garage sale, or just a place where people would list old things that still had some value that they were willing to give away. I got a basketball hoop, a hockey net, and a spoiler for my car, all 3 in perfect condition in that same year. You'd be lucky if you found something like that these days. Anyway, me and my son were dying to buy a hockey net so we could practice in the cul-de-sac we lived in. For the record, this was before I got that free one I mentioned. Wouldn't you know it, on Craigslist there was an ad for a slightly used regulation-size hockey goal for only $50. It came with a puck and 2 slightly used hockey sticks. I still have a picture of that ad to this day. It seemed like the perfect deal, but he lived about 2 hours away. I called the number he had listed, and he sounded pretty normal on the phone. He had a pretty deep, dark voice, but nothing that would be off-putting. I remember his voice being a bit emotionless. He agreed to meet halfway due to the distance. Said he'd put the stuff in the back of his pickup truck. He said he could only come after he got off from work, though, which was much later in the day, way past dark. We agreed to meet at some rest stop off the highway. Me and my son, who was 11 at the time, took my wife's minivan, the only car that would be able to fit that huge thing. Within an hour, we were at the truck stop, which was empty at this hour, but was decently lit by 3 big light posts. I parked right under one of the lights and waited. A pickup truck pulled in off the highway right on time. He stopped right in front of me. I went over to his window, but then noticed there was nothing in the back of his truck. "You Steve?" he asked me. "Yep, that's me," I said. "All right, my buddy's bringing in the stuff with his truck." The guy pulled up behind my car and put it in park. I suddenly had a bad feeling. I told my son to get back in the car and lock every door except mine. 2 more pairs of headlights came off the highway into the lots, surely enough pulling up next to me. And, not surprisingly at this point, there was no hockey equipment in either one of them. My heart was racing. I was worried. Not for me, but for my young son who I for some reason brought with me on this trip. A group of large men mixed with heavy-set and muscular physiques stepped out of the 2 pickup trucks behind the first one. They eyed me from head to toe, giving that typical intimidation stare down. Then this bald guy wearing sunglasses said in a deep voice, "Where's the money?" I instantly pulled out my wallet and handed it to him, begging him to just let me and my son go. He pulled out like $100 and was pissed, expecting more. He then sent 2 of his goons or whatever to get my son. At this point, I screamed and begged for him not to take him. One of the men broke the glass to the minivan back door, and I vividly remember the disturbing, heartbreaking screams of my young son. What happened next was what I can only explain to be a miracle from God answering my prayers. A car was entering the lot from off the highway. All the men stopped and turned to look at it. As it got closer, my heart literally dropped in excitement as I saw it was a police car. The lights suddenly began to flash as he got close enough to see what was going on. All of the men were back in their trucks within seconds, speeding off down the highway. Well, at least 2 of them. The truck in the back was caught immediately by the police car, and backup arrived shortly. I explained everything to them, and I got the men that were caught to rat out on the others surprisingly quickly. I guess luckily the guys in the back truck weren't very loyal to whoever their leader was, if they even had any type of leader. Believe it or not, I had a police escort all the way home to make me and my son feel safer. I don't want to get into all the legal stuff, but I'll just say that all of those men except for one was caught, and I'm pretty sure that was the driver of the first pickup truck. Needless to say, my Craigslist days weren't over at that point, but I have always been much more protective of my son and much more cautious of Craigslist meetings since then. There was once an isolated island off the coast of Scotland where 3 lighthouse keepers lived and were responsible for keeping the building intact. One day, when their monthly supply ship dropped in, the island was silent. No response from the lighthouse keepers. Eventually, the captain and some crew members went to investigate and found a disturbingly empty lighthouse. 2 of the 3 waterproof coats were missing from their hangars, and the kitchen was left in a state as if people had left in a hurry. The lighthouse log only added more mystery to the situation. The log described how one of the keepers wouldn't talk, and the other continuously cried for hours. All this pain and fear seemed to be coming from what was referred to as a powerful storm looming in the distance. However, this begs the question, why were they so scared of a simple storm? They should have been safe in the brand new lighthouse, right? The log goes on to talk about how they all sat close together and prayed for the storm to be over. The final log states, "The storm has passed, the skies are calm, and God is over all." Their bodies were never found, and the cause of their death is still a mystery to this day. The most accepted theory is that they somehow got swept out to sea during the storm, never to be seen again. But one final detail remains, one that scared the captain and his crew to the bone. The powerful storm described in the log didn't exist. There were no storms reported in the area. In fact, the skies were calm all day. It was 2 years ago. I was called in to do the night shift, 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. at
Let's get to
7-Eleven.
the good part.
For the first time all night, I felt like I was being watched, even with all the blinds shut. And I could swear I heard strange noises coming from all over my house. I refused to get any sleep until the sun came up. Weeks passed, and I had forgotten about the incident until one day, when going into the basement for the first time in a while, I found that papers had been scattered all over the floor. And when I went into the basement closet, I found writing on the walls. 7-Eleven had been written in Sharpie on the wall, along with the address to the 7-Eleven I worked at and my house address. The most disturbing part, I also found various kitchen knives, along with a large pocket knife sitting in the closet. What started out as seemingly just an innocent person turning into something of a prank ultimately turned into something much more horrifying. He had been living down there for God knows how long, and I'm just grateful that for whatever reason he changed his mind and left, because I haven't seen or heard from him since. All I could say is that man is dangerously ill.
Okay. Yeah. What is this?
About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommates that even the drug dealers in the city were polite. But all that changed in just a few minutes in one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police-patrolled park quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I went down a short side street in order to loop back down my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky and wearing an old suit.
Oh no.
He danced closer still until I could make out his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off of him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back, and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking skyward, smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked, and I stood there for some time, staring at him, and then he started moving toward me again. He took giant, exaggerated tiptoed steps, as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point that I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen, as the smiling man crept toward me.
Oh no.
And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling a smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What the fuck do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whimper. What the fuck? Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice. That only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there, smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around, very slowly, and started dance walking away. Just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go, until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him got bigger and bigger. He was coming back my way. He was coming back my way, and this time he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off the side road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of my way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see.
Okay, I've seen that, but like the rest. Oh, that one scared me. This is last bit of it.
So me and a couple of my buddies went camping last summer alongside the Willamette River. We actually had a decent hike into the deep end of the woods. We did some night fishing, listening to music, and basically drank to the point where everything was funny later in the night. I would guess we finally called it a night somewhere past 2 a.m. I shared a tent with one of my buds, while the other two shared another tent. We heard them laughing about something. At first we laughed at the sound of their laughing, but it soon got annoying and we yelled for them to shut up. One of them responded, "It isn't us." I sat up, startled at the response. I came to realize that it was the sound of only one person laughing, and it didn't sound like either one of my friends. Even in my drunk state, I realized how odd it was for somebody to be out this far in the woods so late at night. The laughing gradually got closer and louder to our campout. My friend shot up and looked at me with a worried look on his face. I heard my other friends scream over to us that they were getting freaked out. As the laughing got even closer, I could make it out very clearly to be the laugh of a male, probably in his 30s or 40s. He sounded like he was as drunk as us, messing around with friends, but we only heard his laugh, nobody else. There was something indescribably creepy about his laugh, too, as if it was missing something to it. You had to be there to understand what I mean. The laughing was now just at the edge of our campsite. But we couldn't hear any footsteps at all. Now that may not seem like a big deal. It was impossible to move through that without making noise. And finally, all of a sudden, the laughing stopped completely. We had no idea where whoever that was standing, as he hadn't made a single stepping sound. We sat there in silence looking at each other. My friend was clearly freaking out, but he was keeping it together the best he could. Finally, something broke the silence. The sound of something rubbing against the cottony fabric of the tent. We saw the outline of a hand through the moonlight, pressing on the tent. We both screamed at the top of our lungs before getting out of the tent. We ran as fast as we could through the woods, our other friends following us. After about 5 minutes of running, we somehow found our car. I actually puked from running so much before taking the wheel. I don't condone drinking and driving, but I still believe we were just in this situation. By far the most horrific experience of my life. No idea who or what the hell that was, or what they wanted. Or outside of every bed, or what they wanted. It's in the situation. What the? I was having a horrifying dream, possibly the most disturbing nightmare of my life. I was in my house, or the closest thing to my house that my dream could produce. Ironically enough, I was in bed in this dream, or at least I can only start remembering past the point of my lying in bed. And all of a sudden,
Five Nights at Freddy's.
the sound came from downstairs. I walked downstairs in the dark, not turning on any lights, to where I thought the sound was coming from. I was on my middle floor now. The dream was telling me to go downstairs to my laundry room, and so I did. But as I got there, expecting the noise to be louder and closer, it sounded like it was just as far as before. Now I was going upstairs to the kitchen, and it's strange. Outside of every window was complete blackness, not general nighttime darkness. There was nothingness. I think all that existed in this dream was my house. Now my dream started to suggest that the banging sounds were coming from upstairs, so I went back upstairs and was eventually led to the attic door. I was surely beyond that door. I opened it.
Guys,
There was
this
an
is
old woman standing
good.
by a bunch
I like
of boxes. She was slowly but loudly slamming her hand on one of the boxes, producing an unnatural sound. I tried to quietly step back away from the attic, but the old woman turned around, opened her mouth twice as wide as anyone humanly could, reached out her arms, began to scream, and leap toward me. That's when I woke up. I thought it was just a horrific dream, but when I heard a bang coming from downstairs, a bang similar to what I heard in my dream, I felt my heart completely drop. On my way downstairs, there was another bang. It was the front door. I got the butcher knife from my knife holder in the kitchen and crouched behind the door. I was waiting for the next time he would pound on the door, and I would warn him to go away. I waited for a good minute in silence and finally decided to take a quick look through the window. There was somebody standing in my driveway. I couldn't tell if he was facing me or looking at me or not, but he was surely the one who was pounding on my door at 4 a.m. He walked away down the sidewalk moments after he must have
He was
noticed me.
looking that way, the other
The
way.
pounding on my door was the kind of pounding you would expect from someone trying to break in a door, not to get a house owner's attention. I thought it was just crazy and horrifying that the pounding and banging from this potential robber or killer didn't wake me up. Rather, it became the key point to a horrifying dream.
How would he know? I had to itch my head, but I seen that weird thing. Yeah, this is. Oh no, they're doing Luigi.
I was 19 years old at the time, working at a sketchy motel. The motel was pretty run down. The majority of people
You're
who
a
stayed
girl,
there were
not a
locals
boy.
that were just doing things they weren't supposed to be doing. Let's just say the cops came by multiple times a week. I worked as both a front desk person, checking in these creeps all hours of the night, and as a housekeeper who got to clean up their nasty, vomit-smelling rooms afterwards. One afternoon, I was working as a housekeeper in the second building of the motel on the backside furthest from the office. I hated working over there because it not only had the most worn-down rooms, but it was always pretty vacant over there and way too quiet for comfort. I began cleaning one of my last rooms and wanted to get done in a hurry because it was getting late. I was washing the mirror in the room that I was cleaning, and all of a sudden, I saw a man in the reflection staring at me. He was mid-50s, dirty, with long, greasy hair. Startled, I screamed, "Oh my God." I told him he scared me. The room I was currently cleaning was vacant, so there was no reason why this man should have been in there watching me clean. However, we just had a meeting on customer satisfaction, and my boss was really pressuring us to be more polite and help the guests any way we could. Sir? I asked him cautiously. Can I get you anything? Towels? The man just stared back at me with a crooked grin and held out his hands to me. I thought maybe he was handing me a tip for cleaning his room earlier, but when I looked down, I saw he was holding a $100 bill. Alarms started going off in my head. No one tips $100 on a $40 a night room. The man just smiled and said his name was Terry. He said he was staying in the room next door with his wife Sherry and sort of joked about their names rhyming. He smelled like car oil and alcohol. When I asked him why he was trying to hand me $100, he laughed deep in his throat and said, "Me and my wife were watching you, and we just wanted to have fun with you." I felt like my heart jumped into my throat. No, I can't do that, sir. I'm sorry. I wanted to run out of the room screaming, but he was blocking the door, my only exit. The man smiled again, taking on a softer tone of voice, and invited me to come into his room to meet his wife, just to talk as friends. I nervously told him no again, and that I had a lot of work to do for the day. I prayed to God he would just go away, and eventually he did. He grunted and walked off in what I assumed to be the direction of his room. My mind began racing. There is no wife, I thought. This man could try and kidnap me. I was 110 pounds at the time and not very strong. He could easily overpower me. I locked the room from the inside and went directly to the phone to call my manager at the front desk, but the phone wasn't working. Adrenaline began pumping through my veins, and despite what I was always told not to do, I was panicking. Did he cut the line? No, I thought. This is a crappy motel. It happens all the time. But I just have to get out. I remembered that I had my cell phone out on my housekeeping card, but that was outside the locked door. I'd have to open the door to get it. I cautiously opened the door to the room that I was cleaning and peered out. I didn't see anyone, so I frantically began searching my cart for my cell phone. I was wasting too much time looking for it, so I just decided to run as fast as I could and make a break for the front desk in the office. Then from behind me, I heard the man again, but this time he was screaming to someone else, "She's running, she's getting away." I could hear his shoes slamming against the pavement after me. I quickly turned the corner, grabbed my key card, and let myself into a stockroom and locked it. Within moments, I heard the sound of the dirty guy and someone else running outside, searching for me. I stayed in that stockroom for 30 minutes shaking until I could no longer hear him searching for me. I finally got the courage to run the rest of the way to the front desk. When I made it there, I collapsed into my boss's arms and he called the police. The man and whoever else was in the room with him peeled out before the cops could arrive. I was beyond shaken up. According to the police who ran the search, this wasn't the first time he had done something like this, and he was actually wanted for sexual assault, gross sexual imposition, and in the past was once charged with rape. A few weeks later, on what happened to be my birthday, this guy was caught. A few weeks after that, I quit. I will never again work at another motel.
That's really calming. I like that stuff. Okay. Oh, I hate the lazy. It's the devil's favorite
I've
game.
always had one of those old vintage Parker Brother Ouija boards sitting in our closet collecting dust. When I was a kid, I always wondered what it was. From the box, it seemed like a horrible board game, until one day I found out what a Ouija board really is, and immediately dug it out of the closet. I insisted on my brother trying it out with me, and eventually got him to play along. We put our hands on the planchette, and I began asking the typical cliche questions like, "Is there anybody there?" and "Can you answer me?" Other than my brother jokingly moving the planchette around to imitate an answer from some kind of entity, there was no real response. After getting bored, we put the game back in the box. I did a little research that night to find out how to make Ouija boards work. Many people said online that the most ideal environment when using a Ouija board is in a dark room only lit by candles. So when my parents weren't home, I managed to gather like 6 or 7 candles and convinced my brother to try it one more time. I lit the candles and set them around the table in the dining room with all the lights out. We tried one more time. I asked again if there was anybody there. The planchette began to move. I told my brother to stop moving it, but he swore he wasn't. I told him to move his hand away, and he did. It kept moving. My brother thought I was messing with him, but I didn't pay attention. The planchette landed on the word yes. I was only 9, so I was legitimately shitting myself. My older brother had to take over. He asked the question, "Are you a good spirit?" There was a 5-second pause before my brother's hand moved along with the planchette to the word no. We both looked at each other, and at this point I ran to my room and shut the door behind me, but he continued on with the so-called game. I heard his muffled voice come from down in the dining room, and all of a sudden I heard him screaming at the top of his lungs. I ran back downstairs to see what was wrong. He was holding up his shirt, revealing a small open wound that almost looked like a claw mark. He told me to set the fireplace immediately, and I obeyed. He threw the thing in the fireplace and told me to never speak of what happened to anybody. We have never used a Ouija board since.
Jesus Christ. He got cut. And that's quite deep, it looked like. I would have never done it. I would have burnt the thing. You burned the thing. Don't keep it long.
When I was a kid, my parents would sometimes bring me down to my aunt and uncle's place to stay for the weekend. Mainly, I'd spend time playing with my 2 cousins who were around the same age as me. They lived on a small farm with plenty of open space, and we could run around doing pretty much whatever we wanted. If we thought we could get away with it, the 3 of us would sometimes cross over to the neighboring farm about half a mile away. It had been abandoned for decades, with a scattering of derelict buildings and other structures still standing on the property, just begging to be explored. This was, of course, a gold mine for 3 adventurous young boys such as ourselves, especially after my cousins told me stories about the deaths that took place in the house. It was pretty classic fare. Man goes crazy, axe murders his entire family, hangs himself, returns every night as an angry spirit looking for new victims. Good, grisly stuff. Even at that age, I knew they were probably making it up, or at least embellishing old rumors. But seeing as how the setting lent itself so well to such tales, I allowed myself to buy into it. One afternoon, we decided to play hide and seek. When it was my turn to hide, I ran off for a flimsy brown barn that had living quarters on top and climbed the stairs looking for a good spot. There was still furniture inside, and personal belongings lay scattered across the floor. I maneuvered over broken dishes, tattered clothes, and crumbling books, eventually coming to a small room with a closet. Jackpot. There were even long black dresses still hanging on the rod that I could hide behind. I stepped inside and managed to force shut the folding door. My only illumination was a slit of sunlight that shone through the crack in the door from a nearby window. I crouched down with knees tucked into chest and waited. Some time passed, and there was still no sign of my seekers. I waited some more, debating if and when I should get myself up. After nearly an hour, this was starting to get boring. My head drooped. I woke with a jerk. It was pitch black. Drowsy and confused, I forgot for a minute where I was or what I had been doing. As it came back to me, the realization that it was now nighttime and that I had been abandoned here filled me with sinking dread in the pit of my stomach. I tried to get up, but a sudden cramp in my calf kept me grounded. I squirmed about, waiting for it to pass, when I heard a door slamming shut downstairs, and instantly froze. One of my cousins? There was a brief period of silence, then footsteps at the bottom of the stairs. But not just footsteps, a thud too. After every other step. These weren't the footfalls of a child. They were slow, heavy, deliberate. I held my breath, praying they would go away. They did not. The noises continued to ascend. After another moment of silence, the walking resumed, this time along with a steady scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged across the floorboards. The footsteps made their way through the debris and wandered aimlessly through the various rooms. I thought I could smell something faintly putrid. The constant scrape sent cold shivers coursing down my arms and back. My worst fears were realized when the steps reached the bedroom doorway.
They got closer and closer and finally stopped directly in front of the closet door. I couldn't see a thing. After an agonizing pause, they continued on over to the other side of the room and out the doorway again. They faded away down the hallway. I waited for what seemed like an eternity. There were no more sounds now, and I was trying to build up enough courage to open the door and flee. 3 things happened simultaneously just then. I was bombarded with a smell I can only describe as fresh roadkill. I heard raspy breathing behind me in the dark closet, and I felt hot breath against the nape of my neck. That was enough for me to hurtle myself out from the confines of that nightmare space, relying on memory and scant moonlight to navigate through the darkened house. All the while, I heard footsteps chasing behind me, closing in with terrifying speed. It was a clumsy, torturous escape full of trips and bumps.
I'm still here.
Stumbling.
I'm in here
I never
the
looked
whole
back.
time.
At least not until I had burst out the front door and into the country night. And when I did turn around, I saw absolutely nothing. There were no more footsteps, but he was chasing me. That didn't stop me from running, though, all the way back to my aunt and uncle's house. There was a police car in the driveway when I got back. My parents were there too, worried sick. Everybody demanded to know where I'd been. Apparently, when my cousins still hadn't found me by evening, they'd returned home to tell their parents. Eventually, the police were called in and informed me that they had already scoured every building on the farm. The insinuation that I was lying about my whereabouts didn't go unnoticed. None of it made any sense. It wasn't until years later that one of my cousins filled in a final piece of the story. He and his brothers had spent hours searching for me, like they said, but the part they didn't tell anyone was that they thought they spotted me in the window of the bedroom I was hiding in. And when they got closer, they saw that it wasn't me. A young boy neither of them recognized was smiling and waving down at them and gesturing for them to come upstairs. That's when they ran back home. All of this while I slept in the closet. This story took place about
Last
5
one.
years ago on Christmas Eve night. It was around 1 in the morning, and I had just finished placing presents under the tree. I went upstairs to brush up and everything, then came back downstairs to the kitchen to get a glass of water before bed. My son Jake, who was 4 at the time, was standing by the stairs leading to the basement. I asked him what he was doing up so late. He pointed down the stairs and said, "Santa." I picked him up and carried him back to his room. I took a glass of water and went to bed. I woke up around an hour later to my son running down the hall outside my room. I sighed and got out of bed. As I was going down the stairs, I saw Jake by the tree looking at presents. Then he ran past me into the basement stairs again. He pointed down the stairs again. This time I looked down the stairwell, and my heart dropped as I saw a black figure sitting on the bottom step. I almost screamed, but I somehow held it in. I pulled my son quietly away from the basement door and closer to the front door of the house. I moved my hand away from my son's mouth to reach for the lock on the doorknob. I tried to pull the door open as quietly as possible, but it was pointless. The squeaky hinges let out the usual ear-piercing screeches, and I cringed in my mouth and eyes as I did. Suddenly, there were heavy stomps coming from up the basement stairs. I screamed and pushed open the storm door and practically threw Jake outside. I shut both doors behind us and we ran to the neighbor's house. I rang the doorbell as fast as possible, probably 30 times before they answered. After that, we went inside and stayed there and waited for the police. Whoever that person was gone, though, as determined after the police conducted a thorough investigation of the house. I ended up lying to Jake, telling him that I actually was Santa Claus. But a few years later, he remembered the incident and became a little more wise to what actually happened.
Alright, let's watch this. This will be the last one. Oh, and dear, perfect. actually home alone. Cool with Family Guy now. They just don't look at these. Furby. That was Matrix. Don't tell me it's Attack on Titan. These kids are missing their singing. These kids are missing their singing. This is the scariest one I've seen. Oh my god. I was hiding.
Little massage.
Well, that's all I have today. Good day.